At what point does the brand step in and go, right, we're opening a lawsuit against you and I don't want it to ever become like corporate?
Okay, hear me out. I fell down a rabbit hole, and what I found surprised me. Matt Armstrong, the guy buying wrecked Lambos, Ferraris, Rolls, turning them into showroom dreams. On the surface, underdog mechanic, cinematic rebuilds, millions of fans, tidy, happy endings. But what if it's not that tidy? There are whispers. A luxury customiser saying his Lambo work wasn't up to scratch. Bugatti refusing him parts. A $6 million rebuild sparking chaos. This isn't a takedown. It's a conversation. Let's rewind. Who is Matt Armstrong? If you're not already familiar with Matt, here's the short version. He's a UK-based YouTuber, Birmingham specifically, and his whole thing is salvage cars. He finds written-off supercars at auction, usually ones that insurance companies have decided aren't worth fixing, and he buys them at a fraction of what they'd normally cost. Then he brings them back to life in his workshop and documents the whole process on YouTube. Now, what makes his origin story genuinely interesting, before we get into any of the messy stuff, is that he didn't come from money, and he didn't grow up surrounded by cars. He was a BMX racer, a serious one. And when injuries forced him to step away from that, he needed something else. Cars became that something else. He started small, like really small. His first project was an Audi TT he picked up at auction for £600. That's it! That was the beginning of a channel that now has millions of subscribers, pulls in billions of views, and funds itself through sponsorships, raffles, and YouTube revenue. From a £600 Audi TT to attempting to rebuild a $6 million Bugatti Chiron. If you wrote that as a film pitch, someone would tell you it's too much, but here we are. The thing is, when someone builds something that fast and that big, people start paying closer attention. And when people pay closer attention to Matt Armstrong's restorations, really paying attention, not just watching for the satisfying reveal, some of them started noticing things that made them uncomfortable. Questions started appearing in comment sections, then in forums, then from people with actual professional credentials who knew exactly what they were looking at. And the questions, once you start hearing them, are hard to unhear. So what exactly were they seeing, and why did it take so long for anyone to say it out loud? The accusations. I want to be careful here, because this is where it's easy to go too far in either direction. Matt has a massive, loyal audience who will tell you he's genuinely talented and that the criticism of him is overblown, often coming from people who wouldn't know the difference between a torque wrench and a turkey baster, and some of that is fair. A lot of online criticism of popular creators is just noise from people who want to tear something down. But the concerns being raised about Matt's restorations aren't just coming from random commenters. They're coming from forums full of professional mechanics, from people who work on exactly these kinds of cars for a living. And they keep clustering around the same few issues. The first one is parts. The allegation, and it's been repeated enough that it's worth taking seriously, is that Matt sometimes uses non-OEM components, generic parts, or in some cases counterfeit parts, instead of the original manufacturer's components. On an everyday car, that's a normal and often sensible thing to do. On a Lamborghini or a Ferrari, these cars are built to tolerances that most vehicles never come close to. The parts are expensive for a reason. Swapping in a cheaper alternative might look identical on camera and perform completely differently under real-world stress. The second concern is around working practices. A number of people with professional backgrounds have watched his videos carefully and raised questions about safety protocols during welding and structural repair work. Now, editing exists, and we're not seeing everything that happens in that workshop. That's worth keeping in mind. But the concern has come up enough that it's not nothing. And then there's the stop leak thing. If you're not familiar, stop leak is an additive you put into a fluid system, like your oil or your coolant, to temporarily seal small leaks from the inside. It's a product that exists, it has legitimate uses, and in the context of an everyday commuter car, it's not a big deal. In a high-performance supercar, running at extreme temperatures under extreme conditions, most professional mechanics will tell you straight, that's not a repair, that's a delay. And in a machine capable of serious speeds, delays in proper repairs become serious risks. Now, here's the thing about all of this. Matt Armstrong has never claimed to be a manufacturer-approved restoration center. He makes YouTube content about buying salvage cars and giving them second lives. The question isn't really whether he meets Bugatti's standards. It's whether the finished cars are as safe and as well-built as the videos make them look. And, for a while, that remained an open question. Then, Mansory got involved, and suddenly, it wasn't just forum arguments anymore. It was one of the most respected names in the luxury car world saying it publicly, with their reputation on the line. Mansory versus Matt Armstrong. If you don't know Mansory, they're a German luxury vehicle customization company that's been operating since 1989. They make extraordinarily expensive, extraordinarily bespoke modifications to already extraordinarily expensive cars. Their clients are the kind of people who look at a standard Lamborghini and think, yeah, but could it be more? Mansory's answer is always yes, and they charge accordingly. Their reputation is essentially their entire business. In 2025, Mansory made it publicly known that they were unhappy with Matt's restoration work on a Lamborghini. Specifically, they took issue with several elements that didn't meet their quality standards, the illuminated door sills being among the most visible examples. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Door sills? That's what we're talking about. The glowy bit when you open the door? But here's why it matters more than it sounds. In the world of high-end vehicle restoration and customization, finishing details aren't separate from quality. They're a direct signal of it. The way a door sill fits, illuminates, and sits within the car tells you something about the precision of everything else in the build. And Mansory's position was that the standard wasn't there. What made this significant wasn't just the criticism itself, it was that it was public. Mansory didn't pull Matt aside privately. The whole thing played out in front of millions of viewers who suddenly had to reckon with the fact that one of the most respected names in luxury car modification looked at Matt's work and said it needed to be redone. His fans pushed back hard. They argued Mansory was holding Matt to an elitist, unrealistic standard, that what he does isn't the same as what Mansory does and shouldn't be judged the same way, which, honestly, isn't an unreasonable point. But for the people who'd been quietly raising concerns about his work for a while, Mansory's response felt like confirmation. Here was a professional organization with serious credentials looking at the output and saying, not good enough. And still, as heated as that got, the Mansory situation was only a preview of what was coming. Because the next controversy didn't involve a luxury customizer with opinions. It involved a manufacturer with the power to cut him off entirely, and a car worth $6 million sitting in the middle of it all. The $6 million Bugatti. Okay, this is the one. A Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport, one of 60. Ever produced in the entire world, worth around $6 million, 1,500 horsepower, a top speed of 261 miles per hour, a car so extraordinarily engineered that Bugatti's own technicians spend months assembling a single one by hand at their factory in Molsheim, France. It crashed badly. The insurance company wrote it off. The owner, a man named Alex Gonzalez, bought his own car back from the insurance company for $1.6 million because he wasn't ready to let it go. He then went to Bugatti and asked what it would cost to restore it properly through official channels. Bugatti came back with a figure of close to $1.7 million, more than Alex had paid to buy the wreck back. He said no, and then he called Matt Armstrong. Matt flew out to see the car. And even he, someone who has taken apart and rebuilt some genuinely gnarly wrecks over the years, was taken aback by the scale of what he was looking at. This wasn't surface damage. As they got into it, they found that both transmission mounts on both sides of the car had suffered catastrophic tears. Not cracks, tears. The engine needed to come out. This was deep, complex structural damage on one of the most technically sophisticated cars ever built. To give you a sense of what that actually means, the Bugatti Chiron Sport isn't just a fast car in the way that a hot hatch is a fast car. It's a machine that sits closer to a racing prototype than anything you'd find at a normal dealership. The carbon fiber monocoque chassis, the quad turbocharged W16 engine, the active aerodynamics, all of it works together as one deeply integrated system. When one part of that system is compromised in a crash, the damage doesn't stay contained. It ripples, and figuring out exactly how far it's rippled requires tools, diagnostics, and institutional knowledge that very few people outside of Molsheim actually have. Bugatti found out what was being planned. They blacklisted the VIN. If you're not familiar with that term, every car has a vehicle identification number, its unique identity code. When Bugatti blacklisted that VIN, they were effectively cutting the car off from all official support. No parts, no dealer assistance, no factory service, anywhere in the world. Their reasoning, stated clearly, was that a Chiron Sport cannot be safely repaired outside of their factory. Not because they want to protect their revenue, or at least not only for that reason, but because the car is so complex and the tolerances so precise that repairing it incorrectly doesn't just compromise performance. It creates a machine that could fail at 200 miles per hour. And to be clear about what failure looks like at 200 miles per hour, it's not a breakdown on the hard shoulder. It's something considerably worse. Matt and Alex pressed on regardless. The videos went up. Tens of millions of views poured in. And that's when the conversation stopped being about one YouTuber and one car, and started raising a question that cuts much deeper. Does owning something actually give you the right to do whatever you want with it? The right to repair debate. Here's the part that genuinely divides people, and I think it's worth sitting with rather than rushing past. The right to repair argument is simple. If you own something, you should be able to fix it. Manufacturers shouldn't be able to use their control over parts and service networks to make your property unrepairable unless you go back to them. That argument has been applied to smartphones, to farm equipment, to medical devices, and increasingly to cars. And in principle, I think most people would agree with it. The idea that a company can effectively render your property useless by refusing to support it sits badly, and it should sit badly. But, and this is where it gets complicated, there's a version of that argument that works for a phone, and a version that falls apart at 261 miles per hour. When a Bugatti Chiron fails, the consequences aren't a lost file or a cracked screen. The engineering in that car is so deeply integrated, the safety systems, the aerodynamics, the chassis, that an error in the repair doesn't just affect the owner. It affects everyone else on that road. Bugatti knows things about that car that no independent workshop can know just from looking at it. Years of testing, failure modes discovered and corrected during development, tolerances calibrated to conditions that very few mechanics will ever encounter. When they say the car needs to go back to Molsheim, they're not being dramatic for the sake of it. So you end up with two things that are both true at the same time. Matt and Alex have the legal right to attempt that rebuild. And the rebuild might produce a car that isn't safe to drive at the speeds it was built to reach. Owning something and being qualified to restore it to a safe operating standard are two very different things, and that gap matters enormously when the thing in question can hit 260-61 miles per hour. That tension doesn't have a clean resolution, and I think it's worth being honest about that, rather than pretending one side is obviously right. But here's what I keep coming back to. If the criticism is so loud, and the manufacturers so opposed, how has Matt Armstrong kept going? And is there actually more to his defense than his critics are willing to admit? In his defense. All right, we've covered a lot of the criticism, let's talk about the other side. In 2025, one of Matt's completed Lamborghini restorations went through a professional inspection by Arnold Clark, one of the UK's largest automotive dealership groups. And here's the key detail. It was blind. Arnold Clark didn't know whose car it was. No special treatment, no context, just their technicians assessing the vehicle on its own merits. It passed, declared roadworthy. I think that result gets undersold in conversations about Matt Armstrong's work. A respected professional organization inspected his restoration without knowing it was his, and it came back clean. That's not nothing. There's also the financial angle. One of the implied criticisms of Matt is that he cuts corners to keep costs down, but his channel is genuinely profitable. Sponsorships, video revenue, raffles. The money is there. The case that he's using generic parts or stop-leak additives because he can't afford to do it properly doesn't really hold up when you look at the scale of his operation. And his fans make a fair point about editing. A restoration that takes 6 weeks in real life might be compressed into 3 episodes. That compression doesn't mean the work was rushed. It means the long, unglamorous hours of waiting for parts, running diagnostics, and doing painstaking detail work got cut for pacing. Editing is not the same as cutting corners. Matt himself has also been consistent about transparency. He doesn't hide the salvage history of these cars. His audience knows exactly what they're watching. A wrecked car being brought back to life, not a factory-fresh vehicle. That transparency matters when you're thinking about the ethics of what he does. None of that is a complete answer to every concern that's been raised, but it's enough to make the picture significantly more complicated than dodgy YouTuber cuts corners on supercars. And I think that complexity is actually important to sit with, because the easy version of this story, the version that gets the most clicks and the most outrage, is the one where Matt Armstrong is either a total hero or a total fraud. The reality, as is almost always the case with these things, is messier and more interesting than that. He's someone operating at the intersection of entertainment, engineering, and commerce, trying to keep millions of people engaged while also actually doing technically demanding work. That's not a simple thing to pull off. And the fact that a professional dealership looked at one of his finished cars and said it was roadworthy suggests he's pulling it off better than his harshest critics give him credit for. So if he's not a fraud, then what is he? And what does this whole story actually tell us about where YouTube car culture is heading? The bigger picture. Here's where I land on all of this, for what it's worth. Matt Armstrong is not a bad guy. I don't think he's running some kind of scam. I think he's a genuinely talented person who found a lane and went extremely hard at it, and who has inspired a huge number of people to get interested in cars and mechanics and restoration. That's real, and it matters. But I also think there's a version of this story where the pressure to keep producing content, to keep the numbers climbing, to keep the audience engaged, to keep finding the next project bigger and more spectacular than the last, creates incentives that don't always lead to the most careful, most thorough, most cautious approach to putting these cars back on the road. Think about the trajectory. A 600-pound Audi TT, then a Lamborghini, then a Rolls-Royce, then a Ferrari. Each project has to be bigger than the last, because that's how you retain an audience that's already seen everything you've done before. And at some point, that escalation leads you to a crashed Bugatti Chiron Pure Sport in Miami with a blacklisted VIN, torn transmission mounts, and a manufacturer that has explicitly said the car cannot be safely repaired outside their factory. That's where the content logic and the engineering reality start pulling in genuinely different directions. And I don't think it's unfair to ask whose interests are being served when those two things conflict. That's not unique to Matt. That's the nature of content creation at scale. The algorithm rewards escalation. And at some point, escalation in this world means $6 million hypercars with blacklisted VINs and catastrophic structural damage. These cars share real roads with real people, That's the part that doesn't fit neatly into a YouTube thumbnail. The crossroads. Matt Armstrong's story is genuinely one of the more interesting ones in this space right now. The Bugatti situation is still developing. The right to repair debate it sparked isn't going anywhere. And the broader questions about the standard of his restoration work, what exactly is being done and how well, are questions the channel is going to have to keep answering as the projects get bigger and the cars get more extreme. Whether that ends well or badly probably depends on choices that haven't been made yet. What do you think? Is Matt Armstrong being unfairly targeted by brands more interested in protecting their market than in genuine safety? Or do the concerns being raised about the quality of his work hold up? Drop it in the comments. I actually read them. Anyway, if this was worth your time, drop a like. It genuinely helps more people find this kind of content. And if you're new here and want more of this, subscribe. We've got a lot more where this came from. See you in the next one.